At the engagement party, Yu Qian maintained the perfect blend of shyness and sweetness, watching as the silver ring clasped onto her finger. She obediently closed her eyes, letting her fiancé kiss her lightly on the forehead. When she opened them again, she saw Qin Ziyuan sitting in the audience. His lips moved silently. She deciphered the shape of his words, her gaze lowering ever so subtly. He said, "Not bad acting." By the time Yu Qian reached Jingshuang Ridge, her younger brother was still being restrained by someone. Though disheveled, he didn't seem injured, just loudly cursing, his words utterly crude. Ignoring his excited call of sis, Yu Qian scanned the crowd until her gaze landed on a fiery red sports car in the center. Its window was shattered, and an English-Chinese dictionary lay splayed across the console. This idiot must have been desperate to advertise to the world that he was a high schooler without even the qualifications for a driver's license. Suppressing her irritation, Yu Qian shifted her gaze to the man lounging against the car's hood. His shirt hung loose, exposing a defined collarbone, his sharp features relaxed. One arm was wrapped around a sultry woman. Well, a proper little heiress, the woman sneered, eyeing Yu Qian's pale moon-colored gown with undisguised malice. Yu Qian ignored her and addressed the man directly. "I'll pay for the car. Let him go." The man smirked, letting go of the woman at his side as he straightened slightly. "I don't care about the car. I just want your brother to apologize." Yu Jingyao's profanities flared up again. The man chuckled and looked back at Yu Qian. But as you can see, he's not very cooperative. Yu Qian glanced at her watch, a trace of urgency flashing through her beautiful eyes. There was only 1 hour left until the engagement ceremony. Suppressing her impatience, she tilted her chin slightly, her voice steady. "I'm in a rush. I don't have time for games. Since the issue stems from racing, why don't we settle it with a race? If I win, you let him go. I'll still pay for the car." The man froze for a moment, his casual gaze sharpening with interest as he reassessed her. The roar of engines reverberated through the mountains as Qin Ziyuan glanced at the silver sports car persistently tailing him in the rear-view mirror. He'd heard that Ning City's top government official, Yu Xingzong, had a daughter who was poised, serene, and brilliant. If anyone deserved the title of perfect heiress, it was Yu Qian. He'd assumed that no matter how exceptional, she'd still be a delicate flower, carefully cultivated in a greenhouse. But to his surprise, this seemingly frail woman had dared to propose resolving the matter through a race. Still, boldness alone wouldn't save her. The finish line was close, but between them lay a 180-degree downhill hairpin turn, a corner no one dared to overtake on. Victory was already his. The silver car veered slightly to the left in his rearview mirror. Qin Ziyuan, convinced she wouldn't dare accelerate on such a curve, deliberately slowed down to mock her audacity. Suddenly, the roar of her engine intensified as the silver car surged forward, pulling alongside him into the turn. The car's tail sparked violently, the screech of tires piercing the air. Yet, she didn't slow down at all. Qin Ziyuan, on the inside lane, realized with gritted teeth that a collision was inevitable if this continued. Cursing under his breath, he slammed on the brakes, following her across the finish line in second place. Storming to her car, he yanked the door open and dragged her out, his voice low and furious. "Yu Qian, were you really willing to risk?" The word, "your life," stuck in his throat as he met her gaze. For the first time, her usually cool and distant eyes sparkled with a wild, almost feral excitement, like a predator savoring fresh prey. In her 24 years, Yu Qian had never experienced such an adrenaline rush. In the split second when their cars were about to collide, a strange euphoria had overtaken her. The sense of breaking free from all constraints was addictive. Still caught in the haze of exhilaration, Yu Qian didn't notice the unfamiliar man calling her by name. Instead, she smirked, her tone laced with defiance. "I won. As agreed, I'll take him, and I'll pay for the car." By the time Yu Qian returned to the hotel, there were only 10 minutes left before the engagement banquet. Her original dress had somehow gotten stained, so she changed into a dark red strapless gown, once again becoming the serene and graceful Yu family heiress. Walking arm in arm with her fiancé, Qin Zian, she ascended the stage under the host's guidance, her smile impeccable. A casual glance into the audience caused a fleeting crack in her composure. Her gaze lingered for a moment too long. Next to Qin Zian's uncle sat a man holding a glass of red wine, his lazy smile incongruous with the rest of the Qin family's formality. The man from Jing Shuang Ridge. He raised an eyebrow at her, as though unsurprised. "That's Qin Ziyuan," Qin Zian said softly, tightening his arm around her waist. "What?" As soon as the question left her lips, Yu Qian realized the answer and frowned slightly. The host's voice drew her back to the moment. Now, the couple will exchange rings, placing them on each other's left middle fingers as a symbol of everlasting love. At the word love, Yu Qian had to work hard to suppress a sneer. Maintaining her perfectly poised expression, she watched as the silver band locked around her finger. Closing her eyes dutifully, she let Qin Zian kiss her forehead. When she opened them again, she caught sight of Qin Ziyuan sitting in the audience, his lips moving silently. Deciphering his words, she subtly lowered her gaze. Not bad acting. A week after the engagement banquet, Qin Zian left for a business trip to Switzerland, passing the project for Baiyan Town to Yu Qian. Baiyan Town was a tourism development project that Qin's company, through the help of Yu Xingzong, had won through bidding. However, the villagers were very resistant to the forced relocation, and after months of negotiations, there had been no progress. Baiyan Town was built at the foot of a mountain, and on the opposite side, it bordered Baiyan River. In the middle of the river, there was a small sandbar, less than 20 hectares in size, which was connected to Baiyan Town by a stone bridge. The hotel where Yu Qian was staying was located on Yunmingshao, an island in the river. Summer weather changed quickly, and while it was sunny during the day, a strong wind swept in with heavy rain at night. When Yu Qian woke up the next morning, the rain had stopped, but Yunmingshao had shrunk considerably, and even the stone bridge was submerged underwater, making it impossible to cross by car. Thinking she could just wait for the water to subside before heading to Baiyan Town, the hotel manager informed her that another heavy storm was expected in the evening. For safety reasons, all staff on Yunmingshao would need to be evacuated. With no other choice, Yu Qian put on rain pants and followed the staff to cross the river. The current wasn't too swift, and the staff had set up safety ropes, so crossing the bridge wasn't difficult. However, Yu Qian's face grew pale with each step. As she stepped forward, the water reached her calves, and memories of screams and pleas filled her mind. A girl's desperate cries, the indifferent look in the eyes of the adults. Before the age of 10, Yu Qian was well-behaved but, like all children, had her own preferences, curiosity, and playful nature. Young girls were often drawn to furry animals, but because Qin Zian was severely allergic to animal fur, the Yu family prohibited pets to avoid triggering his discomfort when the young children played with them. However, there was a little dog that was just too pitiful. It trembled in the heavy rain, gazing longingly at the well-groomed pet dogs in the bookstore. Young Yu Qian's heart ached, and she nearly cried. Despite the risk of being scolded by her parents, she secretly took the dog and kept it in an abandoned warehouse behind the house. She was careful, and the dog was well-behaved, never running or barking. It would just wag its tail vigorously when its little owner visited at night. "Once I grow up, I'll take you with me," Yu Qian promised the little dog solemnly. But then, Qin Zian arrived. He visited the Yu family with his mother, and within 10 minutes, rashes appeared on his skin, his face turned red, and he was rushed to the hospital by both families. Yu Qian's father searched the house thoroughly and eventually found the little dog in the warehouse. The dog had been cared for by Yu Qian for over a month and had grown much rounder and cleaner. When the dog saw the visitors, it hesitated, then wagged its tail joyfully when it spotted Yu Qian. But before it could run to her, An adult grabbed it by the back of its neck. Perhaps the dog sensed the hostility, but since it was with its little owner, it still cautiously wagged its tail and softly called out to the man. "Dad." Yu Qian spoke quietly. "Qian, why didn't you listen?" her father said indifferently, giving her a cold look. He didn't scold her, but in front of her, he shoved the dog's head into the artificial lake in the villa district. The dog cried out in despair, struggling with its legs, but Yu Qian clutched her father's pants, pleading, I'm sorry, Dad. I'll send it away. Just let it go, please." Her father remained indifferent as Yu Qian cried until her throat went hoarse. Only when the dog had stopped struggling did he throw its lifeless body aside like garbage. "Qian, you carry the responsibility of the Yu family. Trying to like something you shouldn't only harms it and yourself." Yu Qian's vision blurred as the sweat poured down her forehead and her legs wobbled, nearly giving way beneath her. Suddenly, she felt someone tighten their grip on her arm, pulling it over their shoulder and bending down to carry her. "Close your eyes." Yu Qian gritted her teeth, too exhausted to care about who was helping her. She closed her eyes and clung to the person's shoulder. When the sound of the water receded, she was gently set down, still feeling coldness in her limbs. She slowly looked up, and as she saw the face of the person carrying her, her expression turned complex. "Qinzi." He replied lazily, supporting her as they moved forward. "Feeling better?" Yu Qian's throat was dry and rough, and she could only nod in response. Qin Ziyuan didn't speak again, leading her to a house in Baiyan town. Yu Qian watched as he handed her a cup of warm water, which she drank slowly. After a while, she finally asked, "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer right away, only letting out a casual chuckle. "Is this the first time you've seen a side of the Yu family's daughter that no one else knows?" Yu Qian's expression changed a few times before she smiled faintly. She took a cigarette from the pack next to Qin Ziyuan, lit it with practiced ease, and took a long drag. Standing by the door, the smoke swirled around her, adding a touch of decadence to her exquisite features. "Qin Ziyuan, officially, you're the son of the second uncle of the Qin family. But in truth, you're the half-brother of Qin Ziyan, the illegitimate son of Qin Haiqiao, the chairman of Qin Enterprises." She exhaled another puff of smoke, her voice calm and distant. To protect the Qin family's reputation, Qin Ziyuan was adopted by Qin Haiqiao's childless second uncle and sent abroad. This was a secret unknown to anyone in Ningqing. However, the Yu family had played a part in it, so they knew the truth after a bit of digging. Qin Ziyuan's lazy smile faded, his eyes darkening as he stared at Yu Qian. He could tell this was a warning. Don't think she could threaten him by exposing her weakness, because she held a secret of his too. But she had miscalculated. Qin Ziyuan lit his own cigarette, standing beside Yu Qian. He glanced up at the mountains hidden in the mist. "Knowing all this, don't you also know that the person Qin Haiqiao had an affair with was a girl from Baiyan town?" Yu Qian couldn't quite understand Qin Ziyuan. He nonchalantly spoke of his painful past, but it only made her feel more wary. She kept her distance from him, yet couldn't help but focus her gaze on him. Due to the typhoon, the rain had been falling intermittently for 3 days. Yu Qian was stranded in Baiyan town, staying with Qin Ziyuan at Grandpa Bai's house. Qin Ziyuan's biological mother was an orphan, raised by this very Grandpa Bai. Yu Qian had been pampered since childhood, and at first, she wasn't used to it. Fortunately, Qin Ziyuan was attentive, and Grandpa Bai was kind, offering the best of his home to entertain her. Feeling a little embarrassed, Yu Qian was surprised when Qin Ziyuan smiled and said, "How about helping out? Grandpa Bai's granddaughter is getting married tonight, but they still need one more bridesmaid." The nighttime kiss was a unique wedding custom in Baiyan town. A bridesmaid? She frowned instinctively, recalling the troublesome wedding traditions of remote villages she'd seen on the news. "Don't worry." Qin Ziyuan seemed to see right through her thoughts, his eyes tinged with mockery. "You'll just be accompanying the bride for a walk around Baiyan town." Yu Qian thought she would be irritated by such troublesome and exhausting rituals, but when she looked into Qin Zi Yuan's eyes, she found herself agreeing. Night came quickly, and she, along with the other 3 bridesmaids, changed into local attire to sit with the bride in the room. She still felt uneasy, her expression stiff. The other girls, knowing she was from the city, were a bit reserved and didn't dare to speak to her. Yu Qian sat awkwardly for a while until the groom arrived. Behind him were 4 groomsmen, one of whom seemed familiar. His outfit was neat, and despite his smile being relaxed, he winked at her. Yu Qian couldn't help but smile back. The group held umbrellas to shield the newlyweds as they walked through the winding paths of Baiyan town. Yu Qian gazed at the glowing fireflies dancing among the wildflowers, becoming momentarily entranced. In the city, the tall buildings blocked out the stars, let alone such a swarm of fireflies. As she became lost in thought, a rustling sound came from the grass, followed by several figures darting out. Before she could react, a burst of white powder was thrown at her face. This was Baiyan town's wedding custom, throwing flour, ash, and other substances along the bride and groom's path, symbolizing the trials of love. Qin Zi Yuan quickly used his paper umbrella to shield her, but some flour still stuck to her nose and cheek. She looked at him, still dazed, her expression unusually silly. Seeing this, Qin Zi Yuan couldn't help but reach out and wipe her nose. "You look like a little pig." Yu Qian, hearing this, wiped her face, only to inadvertently smear some flour on his face too. "Looks like we're even." Her eyes sparkled with mischief, her expression that had been distant softened under the colorful lights, glowing vibrantly. Qin Zi Yuan laughed, indulging her playfulness, then leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Do you like it here?" He had crossed a line, his breath brushing against her ear, tickling her slightly. Yet, surprisingly, Yu Qian didn't mind. But she didn't answer. She simply watched as the newlyweds entered their wedding room, their joyful kiss and the laughter and well wishes of the crowd filling the air. The happiness in their eyes nearly overflowed. Their wedding was simple and unadorned, far less extravagant than Yu Qian's engagement ceremony, but far more genuine and lively. She couldn't help but glance at Qin Zi Yuan. He noticed quickly and met her gaze. Amidst the lively chatter, she could hear her own heartbeat growing louder. The full moon hung high in the sky, and Yu Qian awoke with a faint smile on her face. When she opened her eyes, Grandpa Bai had already returned from working outside. The rivers receded, and the city. Before he could finish, another voice interrupted. Qian. Her smile faltered as she turned to see Qin Ziyan, dressed in a suit, looking out of place in the shabby house. Qin Ziyan, seemingly oblivious to her change in expression, pulled her into an embrace, gently ruffling her hair. "You've had a hard time. Let me take you home." For some reason, the words "had a hard time" sounded a bit harsh. Yu Qian wanted to rebut, but as she glanced over Qin Ziyan's shoulder, she saw Qin Zi Yuan standing outside in the shadows, his expression unreadable. A wave of unease washed over her. She closed her eyes briefly, trying to calm the urge to escape her fiancé's embrace, then gently pushed Qin Ziyan away. Qin Ziyan cooperated and loosened his hold. Just as Yu Qian breathed a sigh of relief, her left hand was taken again. Unable to refuse, she kept her fingers interlaced with his, listening as Grandpa Bai warmly invited them to stay. Qin Ziyan surveyed the Bai family home with the gaze of someone in a superior position, raising an almost imperceptible brow before politely declining, "No need." The old man immediately sensed the disapproval and fidgeted, stepping back with a forced smile as though trying not to soil the noble guests. Yu Qian felt a knot in her chest. Unable to restrain herself, she withdrew her hand and walked up to Grandpa Bai for an embrace. "Thank you for your hospitality these days." Grandpa Bai quickly shook his head and patted her back, telling her to come back again next time. Yu Qian replied a few words, but when she turned around, it was hard to keep the smile on her face. She was filled with an inexplicable anger, and without another glance at Qin Ziyan, she left the Bai house. As she passed by Qin Ziyuan, her steps slowed, but she didn't turn to look at him. She quickly got into Qin Ziyuan's car, closed her eyes, and didn't open them when someone sat down beside her. As the car started, she kept her eyes shut. How did the relocation talks go? Yu Qian hadn't expected Qin Zi and to bring up business right away. After a moment's pause, she replied, I think there's no need for the relocation. Preserving and developing the local culture would be better for the tourism project. It seems Baiyan Town really appeals to you. Yu Qian thought of the full moon, the wedding customs, and the fireflies. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She murmured, but Qin Zi's next question left her feeling cold and uneasy. Is what attracts you here the customs, the scenery, or the people? After returning, Yu Qian had received 2 calls from Qin Ziyuan, but she didn't answer either of them, even going so far as to block his number. There should have been no reason for them to keep in touch. Everything in Baiyan Town was just a dream, and once she woke up, she should return to her original life and follow the path she was supposed to take. Yet, sometimes at night, when she gazed at the distant, hazy moon, she felt as though a part of her heart was empty, leaving her feeling a little dazed and wistful. A month before her father's birthday, as was customary, the whole family went to Yong'an Temple to pray and seek divination. Yu Jingyao had already been sent abroad, and Qin Ziyan had come along as well. Yu family's son-in-law, of course, should follow the Yu family's customs, Qin Ziyan had said, which made Yu Xingzong smile with satisfaction. While they walked and chatted, father and son-in-law were in high spirits, but Yu Qian found it insincere and boring, so she deliberately slowed down, staying several paces behind them. As she was about to turn the corner of the stone steps, her arm was suddenly pulled tight, and she was dragged into a guanyin hall. She almost screamed out loud, but then she heard a familiar voice. It's me. Her throat tightened, and she wanted to step back, but Qin Ziyuan had already cornered her against the wall. Why are you avoiding me? I'm not. Not, huh? He smiled helplessly, his gaze intense. You just can't look me in the eyes. Feeling provoked, Yu Qian finally looked up, meeting his dark gaze, but she quickly averted her eyes again, feeling defeated. She weakly turned her head and said softly, Let go of me. Qin Ziyuan tightened his arm around her and pulled her even closer, his face coming nearer as he asked, Have you thought about me these past few days? Upon hearing this, Yu Qian felt like a startled animal, her eyes widening as she snapped, No. I miss you, he interrupted, his words effortlessly silencing her. She looked helplessly at the compassionate yet indifferent face of the guanyin statue. Qin Ziyuan, do you know? Technically, I'm your sister-in-law. Do you like Qin Ziyan? His voice grew cold. Yu Qian, do you really like this life? A life without love or freedom, only restraint and discipline. Are you truly okay with it? Okay with it? At one point, she had been okay with it. If she hadn't met him, if she hadn't heard that strong heartbeat, she might have been able to live this life quietly, taking a deep breath to escape, then washing away the scent of smoke and putting on the perfect facade to get through the days. But he was like an addiction, and once she got involved, there was only dissatisfaction and longing. Her phone suddenly vibrated, pulling her back to reality. She glanced at the screen. It was Qin Ziyan calling. She snapped out of her trance, pushing against Qin Ziyuan's chest, trying to break free. Let go. Her words were cut off again as he kissed her fiercely, his lips and tongue claiming hers. The phone vibrated on, but Yu Qian couldn't focus on anything but the pounding of her heart. When he finally let go of her, she felt weak in the knees and had to lean against him for support. Her phone had long stopped vibrating, and she heard him softly panting in her ear, whispering, Don't marry him. The phone buzzed again. Yu Qian lifted her head and saw Qin Ziyuan, his eyes red at the corners, staring at her seriously. The incessant buzzing was driving her mad, and in a moment of madness, she reached up, pulling his neck closer, and kissed him with abandon. Pardon? Yu Qian looked at her father, repeating each word deliberately. I said, I want to break off my engagement with Qin Zian. Yu Shengzong angrily swept the teacup off the table, shouting, What's wrong with you? Wrong with me? Maybe I am. Yu Qian lowered her eyes and gave a self-deprecating smile. Since I was little, it felt like I was a gift the Yu family prepared for the Qin family. The Qin family said girls should be more gentle, so I had to be graceful and composed. The Qin family wanted a smart and capable daughter-in-law, so I had to study finance with Qin Zian. From my behavior to childbearing, everything was arranged for me by Yu and the Qin family. I never had my own preferences or choices. I could only follow the path you set for me, step by step. She looked up, her eyes filled with sarcasm and rebellion. I only went crazy now, and I admire myself for it. Yu Shengzong was completely enraged by the defiance in her eyes and slapped her across the face. How dare you speak to your father like this? Look at how you're talking to your father. Her mother stood by, her eyes filled with disapproval, no trace of sympathy for her. Where did all your upbringing go? The taste of blood spread quickly in her mouth, but Yu Qian didn't show any sadness or anger. She took off her engagement ring, her voice steady as she said, You can beat me to death if you want, but I will never marry Qin Zian. Yu Qian was locked in the Yu family house. Yu Shengzong took her phone and locked her in her room. Apart from the nanny who brought her meals 3 times a day, she didn't see anyone else. Yu Qian tried to threaten him by going on a hunger strike, but Yu Shengzong directly ordered someone to inject her with nutrients. Just make sure she stays alive. Alive was all that mattered. She smiled faintly, but couldn't help feeling a bit desperate. However, a week later, Yu Shengzong released her from her confinement. Suddenly, a financial scandal involving a small company controlled by the Qin family broke online. Initially, no one paid much attention to it since the Qin family wasn't directly involved in managing that company, and the issue wasn't expected to affect them much. But unexpectedly, the negative news about the small company grew, like a snowball rolling downhill, until rumors spread online suggesting that the Qin family had been using the company to launder money. There were no major media outlets reporting on it, just speculations from anonymous online users, but the rumors kept spreading, and it was impossible to suppress them. The Qin family was in chaos, the Yu family began to observe, and the Qin-Yu engagement had to be put aside for the time being. Yu Qian returned to her apartment, only to find Qin Ziyuan waiting downstairs. You've suffered, he said. He noticed how much thinner her shoulders had become and hugged her tightly with concern. Yu Qian shook her head and looked up, asking, Did you do it? Yes. Won't the Qin family come after you? There was some worry in her eyes, but Qin Ziyuan couldn't help but kiss her. Don't worry. I made some deals with Qin Haiqiao, so he can't touch me. Changing the subject, he asked, How about some late-night snacks? Qin Ziyuan took her to a popular local eatery, where he didn't even look at the menu, but skillfully ordered skewers and beer. When he turned around, he saw that Yu Qian was already holding a cigarette between her fingers. He didn't stop her, only saying, Don't smoke too much. Yu Qian exhaled slowly, a smile playing on her lips. I've never had this before. The ones at the restaurant are always cut into small pieces, and they barely use any seasoning, saying it's to preserve the natural flavor of the meat. She rambled on about her years of seemingly elegant, but actually restrictive life. After the waiter brought the skewers, she picked up a beef skewer. They say eating this way is bad manners, that it's embarrassing, she said, taking a big bite of the beef, her cheeks puffing up. Amiable no. Qin Ziyuan wiped the oil from the corner of her mouth. No, you're cute. Xian with me. You never have to worry about your image or rules. You can do whatever you like, as long as it makes you happy. I'll always be here for you. Yu Qian looked into his eyes, and despite not having drunk, she felt a little tipsy. She rested her chin on her hands, her nose scrunching. Qin Ziyuan, you're really good at saying sweet things. Qin Ziyuan froze for a moment, amused, ready to retort, but before he could, she continued, I really like it. What? He stammered. I like you. His breath caught in his chest, fireworks exploding inside as he froze in shock, his hands and feet awkward in his reaction. He wanted to pull her close, but clumsily knocked over the beer can. Despite his carefree appearance, these 4 words made him feel like an innocent young man. Yu Qian raised an eyebrow, her eyes sparkling mischievously. "Qin Ziyuan, did you already like me back at Jingshuang Ridge?" His ears turned red, and he took a large gulp of beer, finally admitting, "Yeah." Qin Ziyuan sat beside her, pulling her into his arms, a satisfied sigh escaping him. Xian, I never believed in love at first sight, until I met you." They lingered like this for a while, then he loosened his grip slightly and asked her, "Now that the engagement is called off, what do you want to do?" Yu Qian thought for a moment, her eyes darkening. "Maybe become a vet." She looked a little downcast, but her face was gently cupped by him, lifting her chin to form a smile. "You will." For the next half-month, the two lived like ordinary people. Strangely, neither the Qin family nor the Yu family reacted to them. Qin Ziyuan explained it was because he had made some deals with the Qin family, ensuring he could compete fairly with Qin Ziyan. Yu Qian always felt that things weren't as simple as he said, but Qin Ziyuan always skillfully diverted the conversation, using new gadgets and distractions to pull her attention away. Yu Shengzong's grand birthday arrived amidst cloudy weather that couldn't decide whether to rain or not. The guest list was filled with influential figures from both the political and business spheres of Ning City. Yu Qian stayed by her father's side, smiling and greeting people. After exchanging a few pleasantries, she heard a commotion at the door. The Qin family had arrived. There was a moment of silence in the hall, and as people saw who was entering, the gossip began. Qin Haiqiao, the chairman of the Qin family, entered with Qin Ziyan. Surprisingly, Qin Ziyuan replaced his usual partner, Qin Ziyan's second uncle, who was mysteriously absent. Rumor said it was Qin Ziyuan who had replaced his second uncle's position after the older man's scandal, and the Qin family had to exile him from Ning City while giving his shares to Qin Ziyuan. Qin Ziyuan wore a satin suit, his usual lazy smile on his face. Upon seeing Yu Qian, his smile deepened. Yu Qian hid the ripple of surprise in her eyes and greeted her father. As the banquet continued, no one noticed when Yu Qian was quietly guided into a black sedan. Although the Qin family agreed to break off the engagement, without the Qin family's interference, Yu Shengzong would probably still try to marry you off to the Zhang family or the Wang family. You need to leave first, to a place where Yu Shengzong can't reach, and only then will you truly be free. On his birthday, I'll take the chance to send you abroad. The paperwork is already done, and you'll be studying veterinary medicine. Someone will help you there. Yu Qian had a sense that something was being hidden from her. What about you? She asked. Qin Ziyuan remained lazy as ever, smiling. I'll come join you after a year, once everything here is settled. She gave him a blank look. Qin Ziyuan sighed in resignation. I've already gotten Qin Ursha's shares. What are you worried about? Yu Qian remained stubborn, staring at him sharply. Your deal with the Qin family is dangerous, isn't it? If you are confident, why not wait until everything is settled, and we leave together? Qin Ziyuan fell silent, letting out a soft sigh. Xian, sometimes, I wish you were just a delicate, naive flower. Yu Qian didn't hear him clearly. The strong pull of drowsiness washed over her, and she struggled to keep her eyes open. Her eyes reddened and she murmured, Qin Ziyuan, you drugged me? Qin Ziyuan reached out to catch her as she collapsed, gently wiping away the tear at the corner of her eye. He no longer hid the affection in his eyes, lowering his head to kiss her lips. Xian, live freely and comfortably, just the way you like. When she woke up again, she was already in a foreign land. Yu Qian sat there in a daze for a while, holding the admission documents the servant had delivered to her. After a long time, she let out a cold laugh. She didn't bother asking what Qin Ziyuan had arranged, as if she had never known the man at all. A year passed quickly. Yu Qian had settled into her life abroad, integrating into campus life in a way she had never experienced before. Here, she wasn't anyone's daughter or fiancé. She could freely eat what she liked and study what she was passionate about. She went bungee jumping, skydiving, and did many things that had once been forbidden. In moments of quiet, she would open her contacts and bring up that number. Qin Ziyuan had never contacted her. Her dream life felt incomplete. Every moment of joy seemed somewhat diminished. Then, a week ago, she received an unknown call. Yu Qian had a feeling she knew who it was and quickly picked up the phone. Qin Ziyuan's voice came through. "Class is over?" His voice was laced with a smile, his tone relaxed, as if they had been in touch every day. Yu Qian was a little angry and somewhat aggrieved, but she knew in her heart that everything he did had its reasons. She sighed and softly said, "Qin Ziyuan, I miss you." There was a brief pause on the other end, and after a long silence, he smiled again and said, "Are you tired from studying? How about taking some time off to travel around? Iceland, Norway, Austria? Or maybe you prefer the tropics?" Yu Qian frowned and replied, "Qin Ziyuan, come with me." Qin Ziyuan fell silent. "You promised," she continued, "that no matter what I liked, you would always be by my side." He laughed lightly. "Yu Qian, whether I'm there or not, you should live the life you want freely." "Qin Ziyuan," he continued talking, "let's start with Norway. I'll have someone arrange it." With that, Qin Ziyuan hung up without waiting for her to reply. But he had underestimated Yu Qian's stubbornness. She still went to class and spent hours in the lab, determined to stay here and wait for him. In the dessert shop downstairs, Yu Qian stirred her coffee, her fingers unconsciously tapping on her phone. The screen lit up briefly, the wallpaper clean and clear, before the phone dimmed again after 30 seconds. She sighed lightly and turned her head to look out the window. The sharp sound of shattering glass suddenly fell at her feet. Yu Qian paled as she looked toward the man outside the window in a suit. Qian, you've had your fun. It's time to go home." The so-called illegitimate child exiled abroad. Half of it is true, but half of it is just a smokescreen set up by the Qin family. It was actually just a pawn for their dark dealings. It was supposed to be handled by Qin's second uncle, but father didn't trust him, so he wanted Qin Ziyuan to take over. But Qin Ziyuan has always refused. Yu Qian's biological mother was never acknowledged by Qin Haiqiao and eventually died from depression. Qin Ziyuan knew all too well how hypocritical and untrustworthy the Qin family could be, and so he was always unwilling to be their pawn. He had fought back for so many years, but in the end, for Yu Qian, he agreed. The condition was for her to leave Ning City. Qin Ziyan smiled indifferently. Qian, did you know? He originally had a 50% chance of winning against me, of laundering the black market business, and using the massive funds to become the largest shareholder of the Qin family. Unfortunately, to make Yu Xingzong back off, he leaked information that shouldn't have been released, which made father suspicious. Maybe he knew this, which is why he sent you away early. Yu Qian clenched her fist and coldly asked, "Where is he now?" "In detention." Qin Ziyan slipped a familiar ring onto her finger. As Qin Ziyuan was about to wrap things up, Qin Ziyan convinced their father to sacrifice the last bit of funds, sending him into detention. Yu Qian recalled that one call from Qin Ziyuan. He had sensed something was going to happen to him, but didn't want her to know, so he made up an excuse to have her go hide elsewhere. The cunning rabbit dies, and the hound is cooked. Yu Qian's hand trembled slightly. From the beginning to the end, the Qin family was using him. Her eyes reddened as she looked at him with unfamiliar eyes. "Qin Ziyan, I never knew you could be so ruthless." "He volunteered," Qin Ziyan said with a hint of pity in his gaze. He could have continued living his life carefree, a playboy, if he hadn't fallen for the wrong person. Just like that dog back then, if it hadn't shown up where it shouldn't have, it would have just gone hungry, not lost its life. Yu Qian suddenly gripped her clothes tightly, gasping for breath. "Was it you? Did you tell my father where the dog was hiding?" Qin Ziyan didn't deny it. Instead, he gently patted her back, helping her breathe. Qian, we are one. We share the same childhood, and will share the same life." The Qin family's wedding was extremely extravagant. Nearly half of Ning City was invited. The media raised their cameras and microphones, fighting to be the first to report, even if they couldn't get an exclusive. The Qin family had recently been embroiled in money laundering accusations, sending someone to prison, yet they still stood firm, unshaken. The investigation team had yet to leave, but they boldly made a marriage alliance with the Yu family. Everyone was watching this wedding, wondering whether it was legitimate or if the Qin family, with their power and connections, was no longer afraid of anything. They're here. They're here. The bride, holding her father's arm, walked slowly towards the stage with a soft smile on her face, poised and elegant. When Yu Shengzong handed over his daughter's hand, the wrinkles at the corner of his eyes deepened in satisfaction. "Zian, I'm entrusting my treasure to you." Hearing this, the bride lowered her eyes, her expression full of shyness. When the newlyweds reached the main stage and stood still, the officiant announced, "Groom, please recite your vows." "Qian, we've grown up together, spent the first half of our lives with each other. We are destined to walk this road together." Qin Zian spoke with a smile at the corner of his lips, completely unconcerned with Yu Qian's indifferent gaze, gently uttering vows filled with words like forever. The young ladies in the audience were filled with envy, wishing they could find such an excellent and devoted partner. As the applause echoed, the officiant turned to Yu Qian. "Please, bride, recite your vows." Yu Qian looked at Qin Zian and suddenly smiled. He froze for a moment, a bad premonition rising in his heart. From the wedding preparations until now, she had always seemed detached, neither showing interest nor resistance, just going along with everything. This was the first time she had smiled sincerely. Yu Qian raised the microphone in one hand. The other hand, which had been tightly clasped in front of her, now revealed a USB drive. Her voice was clear and deliberate, echoing throughout the banquet hall. "I report. My father, Yu Shengzong, and the Qin group have been involved in illegal dealings for a long time. I have all the original documents and corruption evidence of their gray income. I request an investigation from the higher authorities." The hall immediately erupted in chaos. The doors were pushed open, and several people with documents stormed in. Qin Zian couldn't believe it. "You're crazy." Behind him, Yu Shengzong was held down by people, cursing loudly. "Yu Qian, how could I raise such an ungrateful daughter?" "Daughter?" Yu Qian thought back to the time when she had been forcibly injected with nutrients and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. She didn't turn around, unwilling to face Yu Shengzong's hysterical display. She only looked ahead at Qin Zian and said calmly, "You can clean up all the financials, but the Yu family can't. To make Qin Ziyuan pay, you're willing to destroy both of our families?" Yu Qian shook her head. "No, it's for myself. If I had resisted from the very beginning, corrected all the wrongs, instead of being like an ostrich, deaf and dumb, blindly obeying my father, we wouldn't have ended up here. Qin Zian, don't you see? We were all raised into monsters, no emotions, only greed, numb to everything. I was just lucky to meet Qin Ziyuan, who awakened a little humanity in me. And you? You're still trapped in the Qin family's cage, wielding a knife against your own brother." Someone clamped a hand on Qin Zian's shoulder, forcing him to bend slightly. He raised his eyes, wanting to argue, but instead, with a touch of desolation, he asked, "Then what am I to you?" Yu Qian lowered her eyes. "Right now, you're a shackle to me. But once, I thought you were one of my kind, another poor soul bound and shackled." Qin Zian stared blankly, watching the chaotic banquet hall. Above, the transparent glass ceiling allowed birds to hop and fly, eventually soaring toward the cloudless blue sky. When both the Qin and Yu families fell, there was a major reshuffling in Ning City. After the dust settled, Yu Qian went to visit Qin Ziyuan. He had been genuinely involved in the money laundering operation. However, because his information had helped crack the Qin Yu case, he was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. Qin Ziyuan had shaved his head, looking thinner, And seeing him like this made Yu Qian's eyes redden. "You're foolish." He sighed and looked at her gently. "We're both foolish." After a moment, he asked, "Will it be hard for you?" Yu Qian hesitated and then shook her head. "I thought I would be hurt. After all, he was my father." But strangely, when I saw him cursing with no remorse in his eyes, I clearly realized that to him, I was never really his daughter. Qin Ziyuan couldn't help but reach out to comfort her. Yet, separated by glass, he couldn't touch her. Yu Qian pressed her face against the glass. She smiled softly, her eyes curved. "But now I'm really free." She hadn't finished her studies yet, but she would return to complete them. Then, she would open an animal hospital so that stray dogs wouldn't have to endure the rain anymore. Julia once invited me to go diving. I refused before, but now I want to give it a try. Qin Ziyuan listened quietly as she rambled on, occasionally smiling and saying good. Finally, he said, "Yu Qian, forget what I said before. Don't wait for me anymore." Yu Qian fell silent. After a long pause, she smiled and said, "All right." She would no longer wait in the same place. From now on, she would actively pursue everything she wanted to fill the missing blanks in her life. As for someone, let them wait obediently.